Hello, good morning everyone. Clear naman yung audio and yes, please open your camera so that ayan, para makita ko naman kayo. It's actually hard to do or to give lectures kapag naka-off yung camera ng participants. But ano lang, siguro I think this lecture they gave me 1 hour to finish this lecture. So need ko lang ng um konting time for this morning. Okay, so I think we can already start. So, again, good morning. I'm Dr. Alexis Milan. I'm a pediatric critical care specialist. So, I'm a pediatrician and I do critically ill patients. Um, so yun yung specialty ko. So usually for childhood poisoning, I would get referrals um usually for overdose and mga patients who would need monitoring. Okay, so ayan. So this one is the disease registry of the Philippine Pediatric Society. So ang kinuha ko is the January 2025, but as you can see here sa list, 'di ba? Actually poisoning is not even in the top. Okay. So wala yung poisoning diyan. So not really common concern, no, yung poisoning in pediatric patients. But why should we be concerned about childhood poisoning? I think yun yung question that we have to ask when we're studying medicine, di ba? Should we study this principle, or why should we study this um subject, no? But when a child comes in the emergency room with a chief complaint of substance ingestion, usually death would come into your mind and everybody would panic, no? Sometimes even the doctor receiving the patient would panic. Don't panic and be a doctor, but to avoid panicking in such situations, you have to be prepared. And studying during the years in med school is one way of preparing. So, for the epidemiology of childhood poisoning, it's the number one cause of injury in USA, and majority are unintentional. So, 50% occur in less than 6 years old, and ingestion is the most common route. So, what can we do? Okay, what can physicians do? Um, Educating parents about poison prevention should be part of the well child visit 6 months of age. So usually, as a pediatrician, usually I would tell the family, to prepare, to make sure that their home is safe, no? So starting with to make sure na yung mga cabinets, so dapat may to make sure na it's safe for their children. So you have to educate then the parents about the potential risk, how to poison proof their home, and what to do if an ingestion or exposure occur. Now, there's also a second peak in pediatric exposures, which occur in adolescents, and it is usually primarily intentional, which offers severe toxicity, and they also constitute a much larger proportion of deaths. So, for this year, 2026, I think I already got 3 referrals because of intentional poisoning. So that's why for well child visit, it's very important to ask for the heads. No? So in heads, it's asking for the home, the education, activities or alcohol use, diet, drugs, self-esteem, sexuality, and safety or suicide. So this will make us aware of risk factors and signs of drug abuse or suicidal ideation. And as doctors, we should aggressively intervene. So, the next slide. So these are the following are the general principles of managing a poison patient, and the ones in red would need subspecialty referral. So as a general physician. So after, by your right now you're in third year. So after clerkship, internship, you are expected that you can already stabilize a poison child. You can already evaluate them, um, help them eliminate the poison, give supportive therapy, observation, and disposition. But the ones in red, the excretion of absorbed substance and the administration of antidotes would need subspecialty referral. So usually they would be referred to the toxicology service in the ICU for the excretion and administration of antidotes. So the question that is often asked first is, alam na for the parents, no, na pagdala sa emergency room, what is the antidote, no? But actually that is wrong, no? As doctors, we don't ask if what is the antidote for this patient. The first thing, okay, that you have to do is you have to ask, is there a life-threatening condition? So you have to check the patient first, okay? Do a general assessment, which is by checking for the appearance, the breathing, and the circulation of the child, okay? So I think this one is, I think, for second year, diba? How to do a general assessment. So it's your ABC. So appearance, work of breathing, and circulation. So by just checking the child for less than a minute, you can already assess if the patient is in a life-threatening condition or not. So example for this child. So look at the appearance of this child. Okay, is the patient awake, alert, lethargic, or drowsy? Okay, check the breathing. So mayroon ba siyang signs of increased work of breathing? Okay, and what about the color? So if you look at this child, ano masasabi niyo? Would this child need immediate intervention? Look at the sensorium. Tulog lang ba siya or the patient is lethargic or drowsy? So medyo it's hard to say, if the patient is just sleeping or lethargic or drowsy without giving any stimulation. But check the breathing of this patient. Meron ba siyang signs of increased work of breathing? Look at there's suprasternal retraction. Actually, if you try to listen closely, meron siyang audible breath sound, no? That's actually stridor, okay? You would see na meron din siyang a little bit of subcostal retraction here. Okay, and for the color, mukha naman siyang pink, no? But would this patient need immediate intervention? The answer is yes, no? So meaning if you see this child's emergency room, you have to give immediate intervention unless or else this patient will deteriorate. Okay, next patient. Okay. O, kunyari ito, naka-ingest daw ng maraming vitamins. O, would this patient need immediate intervention? So again, you check for the ABCs. Look at the appearance of this patient. Is the patient awake? Alert? Yes. What about the breathing? No? So kahit na hindi nyo pa kailangan i-open yung clothes ng patient, you can already say that the patient is not in distress. And if you look at the color is pink. So would this patient need immediate intervention? So the answer is no. So itong mga patient to, pwedeng baka later yung natingnan sa ER, okay? But of course, you have to see this patient, but not urgently, okay? Hindi urgent. Okay, next patient. Ayan. So this patient need immediate intervention. Look at the appearance of the patient. So appearance meaning consciousness. So awake, alert, yes. No, look at the breathing. Okay, you would see actually ano yan, subcostal retraction. And if you listen closely again, there's actually stridor. Okay, so that would mean an upper airway obstruction. Okay, and if you look at the color, pink, no? So actually, if di nyo masyadong evaluate yung child, you will see na playful naman siya, the color is pink, mukhang stable naman. But if you look closely, okay, if you look at the breathing of this patient, the patient is in respiratory distress. So this patient would need immediate intervention. Okay. Okay, so that's the first part. So identify patients who would need immediate intervention. So for the two patients, the first and the third patient, if you see this patient in the emergency room and you already have an assessment that these patients are in respiratory distress, you have to hook the patient immediately to O2 support. Okay, you don't need to check for the respiratory rate, listen for the breath sounds. So sa emergency room, it's different. Okay, so if you see respiratory distress, hook the patient immediately to O2 support. And then after that, that's the time you would do your primary assessment, which is your A, B, C, D, E. Okay, which is by checking the airway, the breathing, circulation, disability, and exposure. So in poisoning for the airway, you have to make sure that you maintain an adequate airway. So you have to protect against aspiration, especially if the Glasgow Coma scale is less than 8. Okay. Next is you have to ensure adequate ventilation. So you have to open the airway. This is the time that you check for the respiratory rate, the O2 saturation of the patient, breath sounds, okay, for possible aspiration. Then for the circulation, you have to assess for the perfusion, the blood pressure, or is there any arrhythmias present. Then for the disability, disability is your mini neurologic exam. So you check for the sensorium. If the patient has depressed sensorium, is the patient seizing? And for the exposure, ideally, we have to remove the clothing, okay, to do our physical examination. Or for poison patient, contaminated, you have to check for contaminated clothing and examine the skin for possible toxidromes. So after you have stabilized the patient, so that's the time that you would do your clinical evaluation. Okay? Di ba different during your second year, third year? Anong unang tinatanong nyo? Di ba the identifying data, you would already ask what's the name, what's the religion, taga saan sila. Sometimes you would ask yung regarding the personal and social history first, no, before proceeding to the physical examination. But in the emergency room, it's different. You have to stabilize the patient first before you proceed with the pediatric history and before you proceed to doing your complete physical examination. Okay, so again, after you have stabilized the patient, that's the time that you can do your clinical evaluation. And this would entail getting a repeated pediatric history, doing a thorough physical examination, and diagnostic examinations that would confirm your initial assessment. So how do we approach poison patients? So of course, we do our history. And in patients without a witness exposure, okay, the following would suggest diagnosis of poisoning. So the age of the child, if it's acute onset of symptoms without prodrome, sudden alteration of mental status, multiple system organ dysfunction, and high levels of household stress. So you have to consider poisoning. So that should be part of your differential diagnosis. So for the history, so you have to ask, who is the patient? Okay? Are you dealing with one or a group? Diba? Meron, I think, meron news, diba, about, I think, methanol poisoning. Okay? So it's a group of people, no, yung involved with the methanol poisoning. So of course, it's better to ask the name, no? Again, you have to establish rapport, okay? So you have to ask the name. You should not refer our patients as um patient talks or 'di ba? Yun, you should refer to your patient. I mean, you have to ask for the name and try to yun nga um to what they call this, refer them to them for ask their name. So we should not refer to them as yung patient lang. And same thing with the parents, di ba? Don't call them mommy or daddy. Better to ask kung ano yung name nila, or better siguro yung ma'am or sir compared to mommy or daddy. Okay, the next question is why was it ingested, or why was the child exposed? No, for toddlers, it's usually through their hands and their mouth that they learn about the world. No, so sometimes they would also mimic adult behavior. So if they would see parents taking this medication or taking alcohol, they would try to mimic them as well. Okay. And unfortunately, young kids cannot read, no, the label. So even na may label siya na poisonous, so akalain nila these are candies or these are, yun nga, hindi siya na safe for them. Okay, so it's very important to ask how much, when did the exposure occur, where did it happen, and what measures were done. Okay, so the for the question, when was it ingested? Usually, the signs and symptoms would happen not right after ingestion. Okay, so for example of these medications, no, there would be medications that um can present, like for example the paracetamol, they could present 36 hours post ingestion, so they can be asymptomatic initially, then after 36 hours they would already present with signs of liver failure. Okay, so you have to ask the questions, when was it ingested, so that for you to know, no, what signs and symptoms to anticipate. Okay, next would be the time of exposure. Of course, to determine the kinetic of the poison, to interpret plasma concentration of toxic agents, to correlate signs and symptoms to the risk of poisoning, and to decide appropriate management. So for the history, okay, so for the past medical history, it's very important to ask the concurrent drug therapy. Pregnancy is a common precipitating factor in adolescent suicide attempts. So it's very important not to check to do pregnancy tests in the emergency room. The psychiatric history, there are patients that would overdose their medications, and the developmental history as well. For the social history, it's important to understand the child's environment to identify potential sources of exposure. There are also environmental stressors that can contribute to the ingestion, as for possible neglect and intentional abuse. I have one patient, a 10-year-old, who has ingested ecstasy pills. Okay, so parang with that pa lang, medyo red flag na siya, no? Na how can a 1-year-old ingest ecstasy pills? So when we ask, so parang may mga different yung answers ng family. So you also have to check that, no? Kasi if you don't treat the family, chances are this patient would come back to you again, no? Possible baka less, hindi na siya that stable enough, okay? And possible na hindi na rin bumalik yung patient. So you have to correct, no? You have to correct or ask for the um factors or risk factors that will for your patients. Sorry. Now, next would be the physical examination. So we do targeted physical examination to assess and stabilize the airway, breathing, circulation, and mental status, and more extensive physical examination after stabilizing the cardiopulmonary status. So if you did not if you cannot identify the poison, toxidromes will help, no? So toxidromes, by checking the vital signs, mental status, the pupils, the skin, and bowel sounds, you can already identify the toxidromes. Then, medyo this will be your clue, no, kung ano yung kind of drug was ingested by the patient. Okay. So toxidromes are clinical syndromes or grouping of signs and symptoms that are associated with the particular classes of toxins. So they are based on the autonomic effects of the toxin. Okay, so there are other toxidromes that have also been described, but in this lecture, we will discuss the 5 traditional toxidromes. So the first toxidrome is the sympathomimetic. Okay, so they upregulate the sympathetic nervous system. So basically, they would increase the heart rate, you would have high blood pressure, normal to high respiratory rate, normal to high temperature, constricted pupils, normal to diaphoretic skin, and normal secretions. So, like, as I mentioned na yung patient ko who have taken the ecstasy pill, so lahat yan, no, was seen in this patient, was seen in that patient. Okay. So that's for the sympathomimetic. So example would be your cocaine and your amphetamine. Next would be your anticholinergic, no? So in anticholinergic, you block the parasympathetic nervous system. So you have unopposed sympathetic tone. So Most of the symptoms are similar to the sympathomimetic, okay, such as the fast heart rate, high blood pressure, normal to high respiratory rate, but the temperature in anticholinergic is very high, okay? And you would also have there's also loss of cholinergic innervation to the skin and mucosa, so they would appear to be dehydrated, so they would have dry skin and dry secretions. Okay, so imagine anticholinergic and sympathomimetic are actually can present with the same symptoms. Okay, so example of this would be your antihistamine, your atropine, carbamazepine, cyclic depressants, and scopolamine. Okay, so this one, okay, for you to easy to remember the symptoms, you can use this mnemonic again for anticholinergic side effects. So hot as a hair, so they would have high temperature, dry as a bone, so they would have dry skin and mucosa, blind as a bat, so they would have very big pupils, red as a beet, so they would appear flushed, and mad as a hatter, so some will present with confusion. Okay. Now, for the cholinergic, so it's the opposite of your anticholinergic toxidrome. So these patients would have a slow heart rate, would have a normal to low blood pressure, low respiratory rate, and normal to low temperature. So their eyes will be myotic or constricted. But, okay, but these patients would have secretions everywhere. So they would have diaphoretic skin, they would have copious secretion. Okay, so again, for you to easy to remember, siguro cholinergic would mean copious fluid. Okay, and the example of your of medications that can present with cholinergic toxidrome are your organophosphates and nerve agents. So the mnemonic for cholinergic would be your sludge. No? So again, increase of fluids. So you would have salivation, lacrimation, urination, diarrhea, GI dysmotility, and emesis. You can also use this mnemonic, your dumbbells. So you can have diarrhea, urination, meiosis, or your pinpoint pupils, bradycardia, emesis, lacrimation, lethargy, and salivation. So any mnemonics naman. Again, this is for your cholinergic. Okay? Then for your sedative, hypnotic, and toxidrome, no? So sedation, it's the primary hallmark. Okay, so you would have somnolence, loss of airway protective reflexes, and respiratory depression. So autonomic effects are actually minimal, and the example would be your barbiturate and your benzodiazepine. Next would be your opioid. And the triad for opioid would be respiratory depression, coma, and meiosis, so meaning pinpoint pupils. An example of this would be your methadone, morphine, fentanyl. Okay. So they're actually similar to your sedative hypnotics in that they produce somnolence. But in opioid, you can see very small pupils or meiosis. So if you see pinpoint pupils, you have to think of opioid. Okay. So this one, it's a summary. Okay, so I think ito yung very important siguro. This is summary of your 5 traditional toxidromes. So you have here yung difference nila with the vital signs, the mental status, the pupils, the skin, the bowel sounds, okay, and other features of your toxidrome. So this will help you identify, let's say, the patient was not able to tell no kung ano yung mga medications taken, so you can use these toxidromes, so hopefully you identify yung possible ingested substance. And again, no, for the management of poisoning, we have it's actually more of supportive care. So we have to support the patient while the toxin is being body. Okay. So for the management, you can do decontamination. So dermal and ocular, depends kung anong route of poison. Then we also have the GI. You can also enhance elimination by doing urinary alkalinization, hemodialysis, giving multiple dose of activated charcoal, and intralipid emulsion therapy. Okay. For the GI decontamination, we usually would use activated charcoal. Okay. And so for the antidotes, they are seldom necessary in poisoning. They are seldom available and they're often unaffordable. So you have in medicine, you have to weigh the benefits and the risk. Okay, would this be beneficial to your patient or baka maging mas risky pa siya if you give this antidote? Okay, and these are the most common antidotes for poisoning. This one I think is in Nelson's. Okay. So far, in this list, no, ano na ba yung mga nagamit ko here? So I have already tried giving N-acetylcysteine for acetaminophen poisoning, clomazanil for benzodiazepine, insulin for calcium channel blocker, ayan, oxygen, carbon monoxide, hindi pa ako nakakita ng carbon monoxide poisoning so far. Ayan. So we have ano naman, available antidotes naman here in the Philippines. Okay. So again, no, the management of poisoning is basically supportive therapy. Again, you have to know the agent or the poison or the substance, the pathophysiology, okay, the half-life, the presentation, and the complications for you to be able to know what to monitor and what to support. Okay, so usually in poisoning, you have to support the patient's vital function until the patient can eliminate the toxin. And again, the the management wherein the elimination and this one the enhanced elimination and decontamination are supportive measures that we can give while the patient can eliminate the poison. Okay. um Sige. I'll just be discussing the compounds involved in pediatric poisoning. This one, it's very quick na lang kasi I think I have uploaded the asynchronous material for childhood poisoning. But this one, I just have to emphasize, no, the most common would be paracetamol. I think we have a lot of paracetamol poisoning. There are some actually adolescents that would read pa nga what's the toxic dose of paracetamol. So it's a readily available antipyretic analgesic. So they can actually buy this over the counter. And for the pathophysiology, it is metabolized by the liver. And what happens is during overdose, it depletes glutathione, so leading to accumulation of your NAPQI. And this one would lead to your hepatocyte necrosis. So for the stages, clinical course, so stage 1 is actually would present symptoms such as nausea or so labs can be normal acetaminophen level. Then after 24 to 48 hours, there would be resolution of symptoms. So at this point, at this time, no, they're asymptomatic. And but when you get the labs, they will already show signs of increase in the liver enzyme INR. And in 3 to 5 days, if there's no antidote given, they can present failure. And one the liver failure, that can already be irreversible. And the only management for liver failure in this case would be liver transplant. Okay, so which is we don't do liver transplant here in the Philippines as an emergency. But we do have, okay, we do have liver transplant na. But usually we don't do emergency cases. Okay. And so we have to catch these patients early. Okay. And what's the toxic dose? No? So for children, it's more than 200 milligram per kilo. And for adults, it's 7.5 to 10 grams of paracetamol. So just have to ano lang no to watch out for repeated super therapeutic doses. So we sometimes see paracetamol poisoning in our dengue patients. Okay, so right now we have a lot of dengue patients, and usually the patients with dengue would present with 2 to 7 days of fever. So they would be given paracetamol around the clock, and with this repeated super therapeutic dose, okay, they can lead to hepatic injury or failure in the setting of reduced glutathione stores, such as fever, dehydration, and poor nutrition. So sometimes you would see paracetamol toxicity in these patients. Okay. And the diagnosis, okay, would be getting the serum level for at least 4 hours post ingestion, and you have to plot it on the Rumac-Macue nomogram. Okay. Then, of course, you have to check for the liver function. And the antidote for your acetaminophen toxicity would be your NAC, okay, or N-acetylcysteine, which is most effective if given within 8 hours. Now, next would be your aspirin or your salicylate. So it's one of the oldest remedies known to humans. Before, hindi ko na rin naabutan, but they would give aspirin for fever. Okay, but now it's replaced by your paracetamol and your ibuprofen. Okay. So for the salicylates, the pathophysiol would be your uncoupling of your oxidative phosphorylation. So for the presentation, they can present with tinnitus, vertigo, nausea, or vomiting initially. Then after that, tachypnea because of the metabolic acidosis. And for the late signs, there will be hyperthermia, pulmonary edema, and coma. And for the management, it's urinary alkalinization, so giving sodium bicarbonate. So we would check the urine analysis to check for the pH. So the goal would be a pH of 7.5 to 8. It's to track the sleep. And for severe cases, he would do hemodialysis. Now for the iron, so it's one of the most common causes of poisoning in children because it's diba, usually available yan sa mga in the household, and the preparation looks attractive to children, no, kasi it's color red, pink, and the severity of exposure is related to the amount of elemental iron ingested. So you have to ask, is this ferrous sulfate, ferrous gluconate, ferrous fumarate? And the pathophysiol is direct corrosive effect on the GI mucosa and cellular toxin causing mitochondrial dysfunction. So again, you have to read the clinical course of your iron toxicity. So you have stages. And this one is the one pill can kill list. No, this one is pag take kahit at least one pill, it's fatal in toddlers or for children less than 10 kilos. So examples would be your calcium channel blockers. They can cause bradycardia, hypotension, hyperglycemia, or sulfonylureas. So they can present with profound delayed hypoglycemia. Your TCAs, they can present with arrhythmia, seizures, opioids, and toxic alcohol. So in summary, okay, again, I think lahat naman tayo alam natin, no, that prevention is key. No? So we want to prevent childhood poisoning, okay? And again, this can start at 6 months of age during well-child visit. For adolescents naman, I think we have to identify if there are risk factors, okay, for poisoning. And of course, you have to know the poison control center number, okay? For just in case that for any ingestion, you can actually call this number. So I would give this number to my patients. Alam na kunyari, they would text me, sabihin nila na they have their child has ingested this particular substance. They can actually call this number. And this one is the PGH Tox Control Center. So they would actually give advice on what to do. Okay, like for example, like actually 2 days ago, may mommy na nag-message sa akin about yung child niya tested vitamins and unknown yung dose, no? So they called this number and they were told na they just have to observe the child for not for vomiting or for any other symptoms. So at least mas may peace of mind on to do. Okay, so they tell the parents that they have to bring child to the hospital or any mga other first aid measure. Do you have any questions? Childhood poisoning. Do you have any questions? So marami na siya no, and actually sad na we're seeing it more in the adolescents. Do you have any questions? Sige. So if not, I think you have a lecture dapat ng 9 to 10, but Dr. Florentino cannot make it. So I think you can use yung 9 to 10 nyo to review your asynchronous materials or prepare na rin siguro for your next class if you have. Okay? So again, thank you everyone and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you po, Doc.